One evening, the famous detective Margaret Cartwright received an invitation to a dinner at one of London's most prestigious hotels. Lord Edward Ravenscroft, an old acquaintance, had written to her, inviting her to a special gathering. The letter began with strange words: "To face the shadows of the past and breathe new life into our friendships." Margaret, intrigued, accepted the invitation, expecting a simple evening, but little did she know that it would turn out to be anything but ordinary. The dinner was to be held at Lord Edward Ravenscroft's grand mansion, at a lavishly set table. Margaret had been an old friend of Edward's from his literary days, but their relationship had cooled over the years. Lord Edward had once been a well-known literary critic, but now he had withdrawn from the public eye and lived in seclusion. When Margaret entered the dining room, she slowly scanned the guests. There were a few others: Vivian Hollingsworth, a rich socialite, and Edward's former lover, Hugh Forsyth, an ex-business partner with a suspicious past, Eleanor Gray, an older. The mysterious woman who had long been associated with the old London aristocracy and now researched a lost writer. And finally, Albert Finch, a young, ambitious writer who might have posed a threat to Edward's past literary career. As Lord Edward invited the guests to take their seats, the atmosphere was tense. Margaret sat down quietly, but Edward's strange glances and agitated manner made the tension in the room even thicker. As dinner progressed, there was an undeniable sense of unease. No one knew that the evening would take a dark turn before the night was over. In the middle of the meal, Lord Edward suddenly made an announcement. "My dear friends," he began, "recently strange things have been happening to me. In both my writing and personal life, I find myself at an impasse. In recent days, I have experienced events that are unsettling, even frightening. But tonight I've decided that this must end. I invite you all to help me resolve this chaos once and for all." There was a brief silence among the guests. Hugh, Vivian, Eleanor, and Albert exchanged uneasy glances. Margaret could sense that Edward's words implied some shared secret among them. Just before dinner ended, Lord Edward raised his glass in a strange toast. "Once again, I must do something to put my life in order." But just then, a scream echoed through the room. Vivian, sitting at the table, had her arms clutching her chest in shock. The glass she had been holding shattered to the floor. Margaret immediately stood up, rushing to Vivian's side. But Vivian's eyes were filled with a strange look. I saw it," Vivian said, her voice trembling. "Saw the bottle on the table." Margaret quickly surveyed the room. Something was wrong. Lord Edward had collapsed onto the floor, and his breaths were shallow. He was dying. When the police arrived, Margaret had already deduced that this was no accident. Lord Edward had been murdered. But who was the killer? Margaret knew that the key to solving the mystery lay in the relationships of those at the table. Vivian's fear was telling Margaret something important. She had to focus on the guests and their ties to Edward. Each of them was connected in some way to Edward's life and death. Vivian, despite being Edward's former lover, had become bitter after he broke up with her in recent years, and she had tried to interfere with his affairs. Hugh, Edward's former business partner, harbored a deep resentment after a business dispute. Eleanor had been researching the lost writer Edward had long sought, but she had come to learn secrets Edward might not have wanted revealed. Albert, on the other hand, was a young writer, jealous of Edward's past fame and determined to take his place. Margaret eventually uncovered the truth. Edward had been poisoned. But what stood out was that the poison had been taken from something very close to him, a bottle from his own collection of rare wines. The real question was, who had meant to take revenge on Edward? After careful investigation, Margaret realized that Vivian, who still had feelings for Edward, had acted on a mix of jealousy and old resentments. In a desperate attempt to punish him for the years of rejection, Vivian had poisoned the wine. However, her plan had gone horribly wrong and led to Edward's tragic death. Margaret, having pieced together all the facts, alerted the police and ensured that Vivian was arrested. As the truth came to light, the shadows of the past finally faded, and the terrible secret of a once passionate love turned vengeful was revealed.